Now before we duck into the demo, let's have a look at our configuration and what we're trying to achieve. Well, we want to build a 2-node cluster, so we've got our 2 physical, completely blank Dell PowerEdge T605s, 150 gig hard drive, 12 gig of RAM, dual-core CPU, a lot of that's irrelevant anyway, and we're going to use a DVD install of Hyper-V Server 2008 R2 on both of those. They're hooked in by 1 NIC each into a gigabit switch, which is also connected to our management machine, which is in this case a Windows 7 laptop running the release candidate, and we'll put the server tools on there as well. Now that could equally be a Windows Server 2008 R2 machine as well. Also on the gigabit switch we've got our SAN, which is a NetApp FAS 3050 controller, or 3050C, and also we've got our domain controller providing authentication and so on. Both of our server nodes are also hooked into a switch which lets them out to the internet to get the updates and so on. So it's a fairly small environment, fairly simplistic, but it will give you a good idea of how quickly we can set up a clustered environment to provide things like high availability and live migration. So without further ado, let's crack on with the demo. Okay, let's get straight into the demo. I'm going to choose my language, which is English. Choose United Kingdom, obviously, very patriotic. Let's go next. Let's install now. Start the setup, and obviously we could be doing this on the other node at the same time, because I've obviously got the 2 ISOs, but there's no point showing both because it's not particularly interesting. There we go, so let's accept the license terms. We'll go next. Custom, 150 gigs, so we'll go new partition. I only need, well, I'll just give it half of that just in case I want to dual boot something later. It's not really a big deal. Doesn't consume too much space, so it's going to create a system partition as well. Let's go OK. And there we go, so I'll use this particular partition and we'll go next. And that process is going to start, and that's going to take about 10 to 15 minutes, and somewhere in between that, to actually lay down those files, do the relevant reboots, get the Hyper-V bits functioning, and then present us with a login screen so we can effectively start administering the server. So we'll come back when that's done. Okay, so the installation's complete. I've logged in as administrator, but there's a number of things that we still need to do locally before we go away and manage this remotely from the Win 7 machine. So first things first, let's add it to the domain, because if you want to cluster it, it's got to be part of the domain. So let's go number 1, enter, domain, so D, name of domain, McSpirit, user, McSpirit/main admin. Put in a password. Do I want to change the computer name before restarting the computer? Yes, because it's a nightmare at the moment. So let's call this one N1 for Node 1, HVS 2008 R2. Remember, this is release candidate, so it's, this isn't effectively the finished deal, but we're as close as we'll get. So that's what we'll change the name to. Enter. Okay, so restart now. So I'm going to restart this machine, and I'm going to log on to the other one and do the same again. So we'll keep going on both nodes in our cluster as quickly as we possibly can. So let's go yes, and we'll move over to the other node. Okay, so we're over on node number 2 in our cluster now. So we'll just do number 1, D for domain, name of domain. Obviously you could automate a lot of this with an unattend file, but I'm going to do it manually, so just to show how quick it actually is. Be an admin, put in a password, there we go. So do you want to change the name? Yes, I do. And this one's N2, so node 2 HVS 2008 R2, because that's the second node in our cluster. So go enter, my password in, and then restart now. So we're going to log back onto node number 1 and continue with the configuration there. Okay, so you see we're back online now. You can see that the domain's been entered. We've got the computer name in there as well. So we'll go to number 3, which is add a local admin. 3 and enter account. So it is McSpirit domain, main admin. Enter. Yep, that's completed. So now configure remote management, which is number 4. And what do I want to effectively do? Well, I want to enable MMC remote management because this is going to be able to let us manage it from Win 7. So we'll go number 1. So it's enabling the firewall exceptions virtual disk service. There we go. So that's done. Do I need any of the others? Well, not really at this stage. So let's press number 5 for to return to the main menu. There we go. So Windows Update is very important. I'm not using a WSUS or an SCCM type patching infrastructure. It's going to be fairly simple. So we'll go number 5. I want it to be automatic. But you could leave it as manual. Entirely your preference. So okay that. And number 6 is download the updates. Yep, so search for all of them. A. There we go, there's 5 there, so we'll select A again for all updates, and it's going to download them, install them. Now obviously I could have used something like a System Center Configuration Manager to build a build of this with the latest updates already in, and you'll see a number of those are test updates anyway, so they won't apply to the actual final release when it hits RTM, which is very, very close indeed. So while it's going away and doing this, I'm going to go over to the other machine and get it doing the same thing as well. So let's log on to the other node now. Okay, so you see I'm on node 2 now, so we need to do the same again, which is number 3, add local admin. So this is basically adding my domain account to the local administrator's account to give me more privilege when I do log on as that account onto the box. So number 4, configure remote management, and we want number 1 on there. So one of the new capabilities in 2008 R2 is Remote Server Manager. So I would enable this, but you need PowerShell for that. But I don't really need that in my scenario. So that's okay, that's done. And number 5, back to the main menu. Windows Update settings, yep, number 5. So let's go automatic. And this is where an under10 file would be very useful because obviously I'm doing the same settings on both nodes. Obviously a config manager would obviously enable you to do that as well. And let's do number 6, install the updates, all. You'll notice, you may have noticed that I've got remote desktop already enabled, and that's just to enable my make my screencast effectively a lot easier. Rather than having some kind of device to capture the output from a VGA port, I'll just RDP in and screen capture that way. So it's going to search for the updates. It'll find the same ones, I imagine. There we go. There's the 5. So select all. And it's going to go away and download them and then install them. So while it's doing that, let's hop over back to node number 1 and continue the process. So we're back on node number 1 now, and you'll see that it says that restart is required to complete Windows updates. I don't want to do that now because I want to combine a couple of restarts into one. So let's go no. Let's go enter, and we're back at the sconfig effectively, so the configuration screen. So in terms of network settings, let's have a look, number 8. You'll see I've got 2 NICs on 2 different networks, so that's all fine. It's obviously got the drivers for those already. So let's come out of there. Let's go back to the menu. Anything else that I need to actually perform here? Well, number 10, yeah, I don't need to display this menu at logon. Maybe I'd use that when I've finished everything. But I want to enable failover clustering because that is going to be used effectively when I've configured my nodes and hooked up my storage. So let's go number 11. Add failover clustering now. Yes. So the operation completed successfully. Restart Windows to complete this operation. Do you want to restart the computer now? Well, I may as well, seeing as I've got to do it for the updates anyway. So it's a bit different on Hyper-V Server than Hyper-V as part of Windows Server 2008 R2 because enabling clustering in that environment, you don't need a reboot. But in this one, you must do. So whether that changes for RTM, who knows? But I'm not too worried because it only takes a minute or 2 to reboot anyway. So I'm going to go yes, and then we'll go over to node number 2 and do the same again. Okay, so back on node number 2 now, and you can see that this particular OS needs a reboot after the update. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to update now because there's a couple of other bits and bobs that I want to do as I did before. So let's go no, let's return, and we want to effectively go through we've done all these bits, network settings, yeah, that's fine. The bit we want to do is really failover clustering. So let's go 11, yes. And there we go. And now I do want to restart the computer so it takes so the updates take effect and the clustering role or the clustering feature gets enabled correctly. So I'll hop over to the other node now, back onto node number 1, and just finish off the remaining configuration before doing the same on node number 2. So let's click yes. Okay, while node 2 is rebooting now after the updates, we've got a couple more bits and bobs to do on this node number 1. But I'm going to exit to the command line for these because I don't need the config tool anymore. So the first one is to do with iSCSI because I'm going to be connecting these to an iSCSI SAN. I have to make sure that iSCSI is set up. So I'm going to go to iSCSI CPL. It says the iSCSI service isn't running, so yes, let's make it run. So it puts a group through the firewall and so on as well. There we go. So the iSCSI, a little bit of a GUI there, and I'd put my quick connect, so my iSCSI target effectively in here. So that's what I'll do now. So I'll go hypernet app. So that's the name of my my SAN. What I haven't done on the SAN yet, which I'll do in a little while, is put in the relevant IQN numbers for the two nodes that I'm going to connect to allow authentication. So at the moment, I can put in the DNS name of the iSCSI target and click quick connect. And you'll see it finds it, it's connected. And with Quick Connect, it's really easy that it adds it to your portal, it adds it to your favorite targets, so it becomes a persistent logon. But in terms of volumes and devices, there's no LUNs. So even if I click Auto Configure, no LUNs come in because my IQN hasn't been associated with any LUNs on the actual SAN. So we'll do that a bit later on. But at least I'm hooked up for now, which is good. So I click OK there. Now in my scenario, I've only got one NIC connecting my node to my SAN, so it's not particularly resilient. But if you did have a multi-path scenario where you've got either multiple NICs, multiple iSCSI NICs, or even multiple fiber HPAs, then you're going to need to enable MPIO, so multi-pathing. Alternatively, if you install the relevant SAN vendor's software, typically that enables the MPIO bits and bobs anyway. But I'm going to show you how to enable that manually. So you type from the command line start/w oc setup, and it is case sensitive, multipath IO. We pop. There we go, no fanfare, just done, and then I can click MPIO, or type MPIO CPL, and I get another little GUI here. So if I was using I wanted to incorporate a Dell or an IBM or whatever DSN, then I would browse to it here, so I could have it on a USB stick and import it in. So that's something that's very useful, and there is more information there as well. But I'm not using MPIO, but I did want to show you how you would effectively enable that. And the final thing to do is actually install some drivers. So my NICs have already got their drivers in place. But if I wanted to add specific Broadcom drivers or update the drivers or whatever, how would I do that? And I would use PNP util. So what we'll do is we'll navigate to my USB stick, which I think is the D drive. Let's go dir. Yeah, okay, so we need to go into the driver package, because I've got two slightly different NICs. Clear that up. And then I can go PNP util, and if I just click enter there, you'll see that a number of commands that I've got there. So I'm going to use PNP util -i -a and then star.inf. So that's going to install all the .inf files that are in that particular folder. Just the one there, and that's done. So I can go back out of there and then go to the other folder, x86, that folder again, and do the same again. And there we go, dead easy. So let's close that down. And then I'm pretty much done on this server. I don't really need to do anything else. Obviously some drivers may require a reboot, and you may want to give it a reboot anyway just to let it all settle in and stuff, but that's entirely up to you. What I can do now is leave this server and go and do the same on node number 2. Okay, back over on node number 2 now, and you'll see that the updates have been installed, the clustering features enabled, so all I need to do is exit to the command line. Let's clean that up. Let's start the iSCSI service and get it through the firewall and so on. Let's go next, and we'll hook it into our NetApp iSCSI SAN. There we go. Let's move it into the middle a bit. So let's put hyper NetApp. We're going to have to come back to this later on anyway to refresh it when we've hooked up our LUNs with the right IQNs and so on. For the time being, this will do. So jobs are good in. Okay. And then we need to do the whole start/w oc setup multipath IO. I'm not going to use it, but seeing as I've enabled it on the other node, I may as well do it on this one. And there we go, jobs are good. So let's close that down. So the final bit to deal with in my scenario really is the drivers. If I was also configuring NIC teaming as well, I'd do that at this stage, but I haven't got enough NICs really to do that. But let's navigate to the D drive, which is my USB stick. Let's navigate to this particular folder. Yep, okay, and then let's run pmp util -i-a star.inf. There we go. We failed to install this driver, and I think that happened on the other one as well, and that's probably because this driver just isn't relevant. It's already got a driver that's correct. So let's close. Let's go back and let's go to the other one, and let's do the same again. And you'll see those ones are all getting successfully imported. So they must have just been the correct ones for the particular two different NICs that I've got in the system. So let's go out of there. And let's go back to, and that is pretty much it. We've got all the firewall configured, we've got remote management enabled, we've got clustering enabled, we've got the latest updates, we've got remote desktop, local admin, MPIO, iSCSI. We've done all that stuff in a very, very short space of time, and everything I've done could have pretty much been unattended. It's just I've done it manually to show you how easy it is, and once you've done it a couple of times, it'll become very much second nature. So what we can do now is effectively leave the local administration, and we can go over to actually start doing stuff remotely and start with GUIs, which is frankly, a little bit easier. So we're going to leave the servers, and we will need to go back to them a bit later on. But I'm going to go over to our laptop environment now, our Win 7 laptop, to actually start configuring the remote management. Okay, we're over on our desktop client now, which is Win 7. It's release candidate, so it matches the release candidate, obviously, of our Hyper-V server R2 boxes. I've got my NetApp storage bits and bobs, which I'll configure in a few minutes. But to begin with, let's just check out a few bits and bobs in terms of remote connectivity to the actual Hyper-V servers, because there's a few things I want to check out. So first things first, what we have to do is go to MMC, click on that, yeah, bring it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to File, Add Remove Snapping, and I'm going to bring in Disk Management. In fact, I'm going to bring in Group Policy Objects first. Let's go Add. Local computer, no, because I want to modify the remote Hyper-V servers for a particular reason. Let's go Browse, another computer, so Node 1, HVS 2008 R2. Okay, finish, and I'm going to add Node 2 as well. HVS 2008 R2, and this is specifically because I want to view Device Manager remotely. So I have to go through these prerequisite steps. If you don't want to view Remote Device Manager on the two boxes, if you're confident that all the device drivers are in there, then you wouldn't need to go through this step. So let's go OK. Let's click on the first one. So this is Node 1. Let's go on Computer Config. Let's make it full screen actually. Administrative Templates, System, Device Installation, and then allow remote access to the plug and play interface. So let's Edit, Enabled, Apply, OK, and we can minimize that one. Do the same for Node 2, Computer Config, Admin, System, Device Installation, Edit, Enabled, Apply, OK. Jobs are good. And so that will enable us to remotely connect to Device Manager. However, it does require a reboot. So what I'm going to do is effectively close this down for a second, because I don't need this console any longer. Establish a quick TSC to the node. I'm going to make it really small. There we go. So I'll connect to node number 2. Log in. There we go. So I'm just going to type shutdown /r and now, and that one's going to go. I'll do the same for .5. Yep, 640 by 480. There we go. And obviously this one's been logged off, so 13, restart server, yes, off it goes. So that's our two servers rebooting now. So while it's doing that, we can get ready for the next step of the next stages of our process. So the first one is, if I want to have the MMC interfaces to manage Hyper-V remotely and also cluster remotely, I need to download those from the web in the form of the remote server administration tools. Now I've already done that already. It's a 30 meg download, and I've stored it on my hard disk, and it's this one here. So 958.830, and it's the 32-bit version because that's the version of Windows that I've installed. So let's go ahead and let's install this particular application. So let's double click it. Yep. I accept. So that's done. It took about just over a minute and a half, something like that, to install, and it says what you need to do to actually enable the bits and bobs. So control panel programs, programs and features, turn Windows features on or off, and there's the admin tool. So let's go and do that now. Close, bum bum bum. Control panel, in fact some of them are there already. See, but I need to enable some of the other ones like Hyper-V and Cluster Manager. So we need to add, turn Windows features on or off. There we go, and so we'll go down to Remote Server Admin Tools, Feature Admin Tools, Cluster Manager, yep, and Role Admin Tools, scroll down a little bit, Hyper-V Tools. Okay, so they're the two ones we'll really need. I don't think we'll need any of the others, but if we do, we'll just enable them later. But I think that's pretty much it for us. So we'll go OK. It's going to make the changes, it's going to enable those capabilities, so we've now got those built into the Windows 7 OS effectively. So more or less done, just this tiny bit to finish, come on. And there we go. So if I click around Admin Tools, see I've got Hyper-V Manager and Failover Cluster Manager, but we'll come back to those in a few minutes. So first things first now is we just need to make sure that we can remotely connect to our device manager and also disk management. So I want to check, rather than use disk part locally at the devices, I want to just check that I've got the relevant things open in my firewall to allow me to view remote disk or remote volume management. So I go to Command Prompt, I'll run it as administrator, and then I effectively run the command netsh advanced firewall set rule group equals it will go and update the effective, the relevant rules. So we can come out of there. I found that I just had to do that. You may try it without, and if it works for you, then don't enable it. But I think you have to enable that. So now we can go into MMC. We can go, I'll just open it. Go yes, full screen, file, add and remove snap-ins. So we'll go to Device Manager for Node 1. Device Manager for Node 2, Disk Management for Node 1, and this is going to be useful when we've connected the LUNs up, and Disk Management for Node 2. Finish there. So there we go, so Device Manager. It's going to prompt me and say, yeah, it's read-only, the device manager, because you're viewing it remotely, which is true, which is fine. I accept that. I just want to check it out. And there you'll see, I can see nothing's banged out. I've got all my network adapters, so obviously the drivers are all functioning correctly. And I can see everything that's going on here in my particular box. So that's fine. And disk management on node 1. If you get a prompt for RPC server unavailable or something like that, you probably have to do that firewall thing that I just did a minute or two ago. So there we go. Everything seems to be fine there. And view node 2. Loading disk config information. If you get that far, it's typically working. And there you go. So I've actually got my USB key in there and the DVD. So let's go and just quickly remove those. There we go. So that's my headset back on. So we're at the same stage now, but you see we've got a 75 gig partition. We've got the same on both sides, which is fine. So what I can do is I might save this MMC actually. Save it on my desktop because it's a useful MMC. So we'll save that there. So now what we need to do is effectively configure our LUNs for our storage. At the moment all we've got is 2 Hyper-V nodes with no shared storage. So let's minimize this. Let's go to our system manager, which is already open down here. You'll see in NetApp System Manager, I've got no LUNs already created. So let's go ahead. In fact, first, let's create an initiator group. So this is a group of hosts, effectively. So we'll go add. We'll call it HVS cluster, and the operating system is Windows. There's a few others in there as well. Let's go OK, and now we populate with the initiator IDs. So what that is effectively is the IQN numbers from, or the IQN details from the 2 hosts. So I'll go add. What I'll need to do is get the IQN. So let's go to TS. We can go to one of the nodes. It doesn't really make a huge amount of difference. Just logging in. I'll move it into the middle. So what we need to do is exit from there, and to get the iSCSI bits, iSCSI CPL. There we go. You see I'm connected. Let's go to config, and there's my IQN. Because TS enables me to copy and paste, I can copy that and paste it in there. And notice the name. So node 1 HVS 2008 R2. So if I add and then add a second one, paste it in again, and just change that to node 2, jobs are good un, because the rest of it will be the same. And there we go. So jobs are good in there, so that's our 2 IQNs added. So that means that the nodes have effectively got authenticated access to the LUNs, but we have no LUNs. So we need to go ahead and create some LUNs. In fact, I'll get rid of this TS session for now. I don't really need it. Okay, so let's create. Let's go next. So let's call this first one witness, because this is going to be effectively our quorum disk. We'll make it 2008. We'll go gigabyte in size. Doesn't have to be very big. An existing container that I've already got on this SAN hypercluster is the one I want. Just grouping the LUNs together effectively so I can apply management at the volume level. HVS cluster is our known group of IQNs. That's done. That's one. We'll create 2 more LUNs next. Call this one CSV1 because it's going to be a cluster shared volume. We'll make it 100 gig and we'll put it Windows 2008. Existing container, so I'll rattle through this quite quickly. The guys from NetApp ensure that this can be scripted, so if you didn't want to keep clicking around, you could script it. CSV2, 100 gig, 2008, and you can see once you've done it a few times, you can get quite quick at it anyway. Hopefully you're keeping up on the video. And that's it. 3 LUNs, jobs are good, and don't really need to do anything else on the storage now, because I'm going to keep it quite simple in the demonstration. So we can close that, and what I can effectively do now is TS back in to our node. So we'll go to node number 1 to begin with. But while it's doing that, I'll start a session off to node 2 as well. Could use the IP name, but just keep it simple again with the IP address. So there's node number 1, and there's node number 2, both up now. So let's do node number 1 first. So if we go to iSCSI, click on volumes and devices, auto configure, boom, there's our 3 LUNs, so our witness and our 2 CSVs. So that's all we need to do there. So we can effectively log off. And we can do the same on node number 2. So let's enter 15. Let's bring this into the middle actually so we can see it a bit better. Clean that up. Nice SCSI CPL. Okay, so we're all hooked up. Let's give it a refresh there. Let's go to volumes and devices, auto configure, and there's our 3 LUNs there as well. Okay, if for whatever reason they don't appear, just disconnect your target and reconnect it or re-add it in as a quick connect. It's up to you. It takes a few minutes to pick it up again. So let's go close that down and we can log off there as well. So far so good. We're now hooked into the SAN, so we can go back to our useful MMC and start configuring our disks. So let's go back to our useful MMC, and you'll see already that if I go to node 1, it's picked up the 100 gig, the 1 gig, and there's the other 100 gig as well. So with the 1 gig, we can initialize. Yeah, we'll initialize all 3. There we go. It brings them online. We'll create a new simple volume. Next. Next. We'll give it a queue for quorum because that's going to be our witness disk. We'll call it witness. Quick format, yes. Yes. And we can then take that offline. And with these ones, we'll just format them in NTFS. So they'll be a 100 gig in size. Don't give it a drive letter. CSV1. Finish. And we'll do the same with the other one. So you only need to do this on one of the nodes. You don't have to do it with both. No drive letter. CSV2. Offline. Offline. There we go. And just check on node 2. I'll just give it a refresh. There you go, you can see it's picked everything up. It's giving it drive letters on that side. I mean, it doesn't really matter. The cluster manager will kind of take advantage of, take control of all that when we do the rest of the cluster validation. So, from my perspective, we're pretty much done with the disk side of things there. I'll mark them offline anyway, just in case. There we go. So let's come out of there. So now we're pretty much ready to just test the Hyper-V, make sure we've got the Hyper-V settings all working there, and then we'll go on to building our cluster. So let's go to Start, let's go Administrative Tools, Hyper-V Manager, yes. There we go. And let's connect to a server. Let's put in N1 HVS 2008 R2. Okay. There we go. And let's connect to N2 HVS 2008 R2. Okay, so at this stage, I'm hooked into both servers. You know, if you didn't have a SAN, if you weren't trying to build a cluster, this could be the end of your demonstration. You know, you've effectively got to this stage where you now can build and create virtual machines. But we need to make sure, because we are going to cluster, that all our networking settings are correct. So I clicked on node 1, click on Virtual Network Manager. Let's move it up there. I'm going to create a new virtual network of external type. So I'll click Add. We'll bind it to the Broadcom gigabit, and we'll call this one McLAN, because this is our LAN environment. And effectively that's all we need to do there. So when I click this, let's go Apply. Yeah, okay, may disrupt network connectivity, fine. And there we go. So that's now got a virtual switch. That Broadcom NetExtreme Gigabit Ethernet port is now a virtual switch. So we need to create one more, which is called Corp. So this is going to allow VMs to get out to the web. And we'll click on the other one. So I'll go Apply. And that one's done. There we go, okay. So I can do the same again for node number 2. So external, virtual network, we'll call this one McLAN again. That's to match if you want to cluster it. So let's go, we'll go new again, external, and we'll go Corp. So I've done 2 once there, hopefully that'll be alright, and we'll go Apply. So that one's done, so we click OK. So we've got our two virtual networks, so let's just test that we can create a virtual machine on each node. So we'll go new virtual machine. Next, yeah, we'll just call this test one. Oh, test one. Where do you want to put it? Well, in fact, we'll put it in there for now. That's fine, the default. I'm not too worried about that. How much RAM? Yeah, a little bit. Networking, not too worried about that. Just want to test whether the hypervisor and everything is kind of working correctly. So we'll go finish. And can we start that virtual machine? Yes, there we go. So that VM is now running. It's not got an OS in it or anything, but it's up and running, and it's a virtual machine. So we've gone from nothing to our first virtual machine pretty quickly indeed. And we're connecting to this obviously over the network. There we go. So let's turn that off. If it goes. Let's click on node number 2 and let's test it there. Next. Test 2. Yeah, next. Finish. Quickest VM in the world. Unless you're using a script, obviously. And let's go start. And that one started successfully as well. There you go, that one's not got an OS either, so we can turn that off. Off we go. Close that down. And there we go. So we've got our two test VMs, which I'm now going to delete because I don't need them anymore. Yes, delete. And delete. So our Hyper-V element is working, networking, everything's configured. So we can now go on and configure our cluster, which will lead us onto the final bit, the final piece of the puzzle around setting up our cluster and going from nothing to a live migratable Hyper-V cluster environment. So let's minimize that and let's go over to Failover Cluster Manager. Okay, so let's go across to Failover Cluster Manager. So let's go Start, Admin Tools, Failover Cluster Manager. There we go, and we're going to click Validate, because Validate is important if you want Microsoft support. You obviously have to be using logoed components, i.e. server, SAN, etc. But Validate validates your configuration, your networking, your storage, and so on. So we'll click Validate. And yeah, let's go next. And let's go to N1 HVS 2008 R2. Add. And N1 HVS 2008 R2. Oh, no, N2, sorry. There we go. I caught myself out. That's got our two nodes in there, so we'll go next. I want to run all the tests because this is the first time it's been run and I want to check everything, rather than if you're adding to your cluster or adding extra components in, you can validate only certain bits of it, for example, but to be supported you have to validate the whole thing. So let's go next. And it's going to check all these different things, so BIOS, disks, updates, cluster disk, latency, persistent reservations and all sorts. So we'll go next and we'll let that run and we'll come back when the process is completed. Okay, so the validation report is finished, so we can view that report and we've passed the test, so all is good. There was no warnings at all, so all our storage and everything was spot on. Only took 5 minutes to run as well, which is pretty quick, but the more disks, the more complex environment you have, obviously the test might take a little bit longer, but it shouldn't take too long realistically. But you'll see that I've passed, and that is my golden ticket for Microsoft support, providing I'm using logoed hardware. So we can come out of there now. My cluster isn't built yet, so we can finish the validation, so nothing's going to appear here. So we still need to actually create our cluster. So let's go to create a cluster. Let's go next. Let's go N1 HVS 2008 R2. Add. N2 HVS 2008 R2. Add. Ding dang do. Next. Cluster name, so let's call it HVS cluster, Hyper-V server cluster. Next. Next. I think the key bit to remember at this stage is that the technology that is underlying our cluster, so our Hyper-V servers, is completely free to download for everybody. So it will run on your hardware, providing you've got Intel VT or AMD V on the hardware. And where I'm managing it from is a Win 7 laptop. So as a partner, you'll get a number of allocations of Win 7 licenses to use. But as a customer, if you're looking to embrace Win 7, it's a very cost-effective way of actually managing a Hyper-V cluster. Alternatively, I could have used a Windows Server 2008 R2 box with a GUI instead of Win7 in this scenario. But there we go, we've finished. It's chosen node and disk majority. It's got an IP address on this particular subnet, but I'm going to change that because that's our corporate network and it'll struggle to register DNS on there. So let's go finish. There's our HVS cluster. Let's go to core resources. In fact, let's go to networks first. And let's go to network number 2. Let's right click, properties, and I want to allow clients to connect through this network. So we'll click apply, OK, OK. And then I'll go back to our cluster. I'll go to core resources because I don't want that as the main IP address. I want to change that across to 192.25. And there we go. So let's apply that. Yes. There we go. Can OK that. So now I've changed the IP addressing scheme. That's all. I just wanted it'll more effectively work with DNS because it's on my domain there rather than trying to do something on Microsoft Corporate where it's not actually part of that domain. So that in a nutshell is that. So with regards to making something highly available, we can go on to do that in a minute. But first things first, in our storage, you'll see I've got cluster disk 1, our small disk being, is used by the witness or the quorum. Expand these, and these are GUIDs at the moment, but they're cluster disk 2, cluster disk 3, 100 gig in size. We need to go on our cluster, enable cluster shared volumes, accept the prompt that this is just for Hyper-V and not for meddling with in other areas, although it may be in the future, who knows. Let's go OK, OK. And then I've got this extra menu item here, cluster shared volumes. So I'll click add storage, tick tick, OK. And now I've got 2 cluster disks. Okay, so you'll see on each node cluster storage /volume1, cluster storage /volume2. So if I minimize this and just pop over to Hyper-V Manager, and I go into right click and then go into where's properties, Hyper-V settings, there we go, virtual hard disks, I browse, C drive, cluster storage, volume 1, that can be my default. Just copy and paste that with that. That's just changing the defaults basically. Doesn't really make a huge amount of difference at this stage. You can do it manually later. And we'll just, for argument's sake, we'll change this one to volume 2, which is LUN 2 on our SAN. Doesn't really make a huge amount of difference. These cluster shared volumes allow truly shared access to the LUNs from each of the nodes. So it was that easy to enable it. We don't need a new file system. We don't need to learn something aside from NTFS. It's all based on NTFS, so there's the file system, NTFS. So we've got 2 LUNs that Hyper-V Manager is just finishing shutting down. So we've got our 2 nodes in our cluster, so node 1, node 2, a bit of information about those, but there's not a lot going on those particular nodes at this stage. There's nothing highly available on either of these nodes. So that's the next job, is actually to start making something highly available. Now, with Hyper-V Server R2, the only really thing you can really make highly available is a virtual machine. Okay, so you see, yeah, there are other things here, but it will just be a virtual machine because you can't configure any of these other roles. So you might as well forget about that and just right-click and go Virtual Machines, New Virtual Machine, Node 1 as an example. Could be Node 2. Let's go, let's not show this again. Next, New Virtual Machine, let's call this Test 3. We're going to put it on a CSV, so a cluster shared volume on the SAN, so it's highly available in terms of storage location. Let's go next. How much memory? Yeah, fine. Do you want to connect it to a network? Well, we don't really need to for this particular demonstration. How much hard drive space? Well, it's a dynamic VHD anyway, so it will start at 0 megabytes and never grow past that size there, 127 gig in this case. 127 meg, quite useless. Where do you want to install an OS from? Well, I'm not going to make you sit through an operating system installation. All I want to show you is how quick it is to actually get set up with a highly available live migratable virtual machine. So we'll leave that off. Let's go finish. And it's gone into the high availability wizard, so it's gone from creating the VM to now making it HA. That's successful. Finish. and there we go, test number 3. And if I want to choose a particular network for that I'd like to use for live migration, so I click on here and go properties. You see network for live migration, cluster network 1 or cluster network 2. Cluster network 2 is our kind of least used one, so I'm going to choose, oh, there we go, I'm going to choose cluster network 2. I don't want to use cluster network 1 for live migration, because that's our corporate one, it's already hammered enough. So there we go, so now it's going to use network 2 and not network 1. If I view any other properties of the virtual machine, so let's have a look around. Preferred ownership, yeah, okay, what happens when it fails over? If I go into the actual virtual machine settings, go properties again, there's the settings here. I can enable heartbeat monitoring, but I imagine you'll need the integration services inside that virtual machine. So you'll need an OS in there effectively that's got the integration tool. So that's not useful for us at this stage when we've not got an OS in the virtual machine. Any other advanced bits and bobs? Well, these are all covered in my other videos, so I'm not going to go through them in a lot of detail or at all now. But in terms of Hyper-V settings, you can see them all down the right-hand side. So I'll click Start Virtual Machine. It's bringing it online now. There we go. So it's up and running. If I connect to that virtual machine, so remember I'm doing all this from my Win 7 laptop. It's now going to connect using the MMC, the Failover cluster MMC, where I would spend the majority of my time from this point forward in terms of configuring and managing virtual machines. There we go. And that virtual machine is up and running. And if you want to live migrate it, just close that down. It's still running in the background. I can right click, live migrate, live migrate. You see there the bar, or the amount, percentage-wise, is going up and up and up. And it's only a very simple environment, so it's not going to be rocket speed. But there you go, the virtual machine is now running on node number 2. Obviously, I can't show you a ping or a live migration or an RDP session because there's no OS. But try it for yourself, log into the virtual machine via RDP, and live migrate it around and see for yourself. But all I wanted to show in this video is effectively how easy and how quick you can get going from having nothing, literally nothing on those servers, to installing Hyper-V Server, configuring it at the command line and using the SC or the sconfig tool, and then going over to a remote environment and configuring the rest of the stuff there. It is very, very easy, very quick to do, and once you've done it a couple of times, it will become absolute second nature. But you've seen how easy it was for me to do it. Nothing's been fudged. Obviously, the time has kind of ticked on a bit longer at certain stages, but that's when I was doing other things, because obviously I do have a day job to do as well, apart from doing these videos. But you can appreciate, if you followed this end to end to create a 2-node cluster with Hyper-V, you'd find it's a very, very quick exercise. So we've gone from 0 to very much hero with Hyper-V Server R2, and this was release candidate, so expect the same when you hit RTM. So with that, I'm going to sign off. I'm going to close that down, and hope you found it useful. And tune in next time for some more videos. Thanks very much.